weapon will prosper. No enemy triumph. He will not overcome. He can't scale these walls. Injustice will not win. Hell's gates will not prevail. Not on my time. Not on my watch. I am a watchman, and I take my place. As I wait, I will keep the faith. 'Cause I am a watchman, and I stand my ground. But if I never see it, I will stay the course. I will run the race, I will fight the fight, and I will keep the faith. I keep my eyes fixed on you.
Hello there. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. I've been doing a bit of traveling lately, and that got me thinking about some things, about history, about humanity, and about the world. So please bear with me while I elaborate on some of the stuff that I got. In the last few years on social media and such, I see this one quote come up quite a bit, especially in discussions involving politics and history. It says, "Hard times create strong men. Strong men create good times. Good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times." It's quite a witty quote and interesting to think about in the context of history and such. And it also has truths I think that most people would accept. But is this quote true from a biblical perspective? Does it apply to Christians? Basically, yes, this idea can be found in the Bible, though it differs in a way, especially the part that says strong men can create good times. How so? First, let's take a step back. In Genesis, the world was in a state of chaos. God brought order to this chaos. God, as you all know, is a God of order. Then God creates mankind in his own image. God commissioned mankind to subdue the earth. Put another way, mankind has been tasked by God to bring order to the world. But as you all know, sin entered the world and chaos returned with it. Fast forward a bit and you have the people of God entering into the promised land. God gave his people the Torah, or the law, for the purpose of creating orderly societies. Also, when they entered into the promised land, the Lord commanded the Israelites to subdue the land of Canaan. But they didn't do too well in these areas. They didn't completely follow the law, they didn't completely subdue the land of Canaan. And this would cause many problems later on down the line. In the book of Judges, we see the same kind of cycle like in the quote that I mentioned earlier. God creates order for the Israelites. During this time of order and peace, Israel forgets God and they fall into idolatry and sin. This chaos causes foreign nations to attack Israel and oppress the Israelites. The Israelites then remember God and call out to him for help. God raises up a judge to save them. The judge defeats the enemy and claims victory. This judge, an agent of order raised up by God, creates peace in the land once again. Eventually, the judge dies, the people forget God, and sin enters the land once again. And the cycle continues. The difference between this biblical cycle we see in Judges and that witty quote I mentioned earlier is that God creates peace, God creates good times, not only mankind. Sometimes, of course, strong men and women rise up and do great things, but ultimately mankind is sinful. And unfortunately, this sinful nature that we have really kicks in when times are peaceful. Only by collaborating with God can we overcome the chaos within us. A while back, this one Batman movie made a similar point. Batman, as you know, is a superhero and he worked really hard to bring peace to his very dark and corrupt city. After so many years of peace, a new enemy arose. When Batman finds this new bad guy and tries to fight him, he loses very badly. Bane, this new bad guy, says to him, "Peace has cost you your strength. Victory has defeated you." And this line from that movie has always stuck with me because it's really similar to this cycle we see in Judges and the quote I mentioned earlier. When we achieve victory, we have no more need for strength. When the time comes for us to be strong, we find that we are actually weak. We face defeat, and that pressure pushes us to become strong again. Victory eventually creates weakness. Defeat will bring us back to strength. Peace takes away our strength. Defeat helps us find it again. It's a vicious cycle indeed. Will there ever be an end to it? Is it possible to stay strong during times of peace? But before we explore this idea any further, let's take a little detour. History is full of examples that can illustrate this concept of strength being lost during times of peace. But the example that I would like to use didn't happen all that long ago, but at the same time, it has a lot of ancient elements that we see in the Bible. Let's talk about Okinawa. Have you ever heard of Okinawa? For the uninitiated, it's a chain of islands in between Japan and Taiwan, and it's close to China. Today, it is a part of Japan, but historically, this was not always the case. Its culture and original language are quite different from Japan. And the people in Okinawa also have their own unique identity apart from the Japanese. The history of Okinawa, long story short, Okinawa, back in the day called the Ryukyu Islands, was for the most part independent, though they did have to pay tribute to China, and China would kind of protect Okinawa and they'd help them install new kings. When it's time for a new king, the Chinese delegations would come over on these cool boats and they'd party for weeks and weeks and weeks in celebration of this new ruler of this area. But this era of independence ended when the Japanese invaded in the 1600s. A few centuries later, Japan would lose Okinawa to America in World War II. America took over for a bit, and then in 1972, America gave back control of Okinawa to Japan. Of course, America kept their military bases, which they still operate to this day. And maybe some of you out there watching know someone who served there. In history, Okinawa had their own internal conflicts, as all nations do. But because they were located on a strategic sea route, they more focused on trade and diplomacy and culture and religion, rather than warfare with other nations. They developed a very rich tradition in art and music and dance and craftsmanship, which still persists to this day. This is a situation I think any nation, past or present, would like to be in. No need to worry about war or national defense, just build your cities and develop your culture. Earlier this year, I had an opportunity to go to Okinawa, and when I was there, I visited the ruins of a castle. Here you can see some of the remains of these ancient fortifications. But one thing I found fascinating when I was there was that these structures seem to have been built more so for purposes of spirituality rather than defense or politics. Though of course they did have defensive and political capabilities. In a nutshell, Okinawan religion involved ancestor worship, nature worship, and shamanism, similar to what you see in the early Old Testament. So, in these castles, they have these sacred places called utaki. They're usually some kind of grove that features a tree or a rock or a spring. And what's interesting is these sacred sites would be found in the highest, most prominent place in the castle. Normally, one would build a lookout tower for defense or some sort of hall for politicians to do government stuff. But here in Okinawa, they devoted the most important place to the spirit realm. According to the displays at this site, some historians even believe the Okinawan word for castle, which is gusuku, refers to a spiritual stronghold rather than a military one. So it should come to the surprise of no one when the Japanese invaded in the 1600s that these castles didn't provide much of a military advantage, nor did their spiritual tradition protect their independence. What peace they had did not pressure them enough to grow strong to protect themselves from invasion. To be honest, I see a lot of parallels with Israel. Okinawa is a small nation on the edge of Asia, surrounded by more powerful empires, and they are trying their hardest to maintain their independence, culture, and identity. But as you can see, the efforts of men are fruitless at the end of the day. As beautiful and as peaceful as their culture is, It did not afford them the strength to keep their peace and independence. But when the vain efforts of mankind fail, that creates an opportunity for God to come in. Okinawa is lost and very distant from kingdom culture. But because of historical circumstances, today, the kingdom of God has an open door to come into these islands and advance. And it is advancing. I have seen it for myself. A few of the churches I visited there are seeing really strong growth and are gaining a lot of favor in their communities. Right now, here in 2024, Israel is fighting for its peace and independence. Don't be fooled by what you see on the internet. Israelis really want peace, and if you go to Israel and meet the people there, you'll quickly realize how true this is. They do not want to fight wars, but they will if they have to. They really just want people to stop trying to kill them, as has been the case throughout history. Unfortunately, they have compromised where they should not have, and they've realized that compromising with darkness isn't good, and it yields bad results, and they're in an ugly war right now because of it. That being said, we are praying for Israel, we are praying for victory, and that peace will come to Israel and to the city of Jerusalem. No matter what sort of hardship we face in life, God can come through for us and for our nations. We can achieve victory and breakthrough with Him. But once we receive this victory, we cannot let it make us become weak. We have to remain strong. We must have strength during times of peace, the kind of strength we gain when times are hard. God is the true source of our strength, and we must remember what He has done for us in the present as well as the past. If we forget, our peace and our victory will defeat us, and we will remain defeated until we remember Him again. When the new heaven and the new earth come, we won't have to worry about war or fighting or national security. But until then, we Christians have a lot of work to do. The gospel must be spread, the kingdom must be advanced. In the meantime, let us remember and not forget what God has done for us. Let us be strong, even in times of peace. Until we get this biblical concept down, this cycle of good times leading to weak men, leading to bad times,